Move away from that issue for now, because it has been about months now of back and forth about the safety of Durban's seawater. Last week, more beaches were reopened, with city officials even taking to the waters to show there was nothing to fear. Last week, the deputy city manager told us that the E. coli levels at Umhlanga have been well below the dangerous 500 colony-forming units per 100 millilitres for some time now. But there are some political parties and environmental groups that are saying the levels are dangerously high. And a lot of residents are saying they're still getting sick. Well, let's try and get an understanding of these tests and what they're telling us. I'm joined now by Talbot CEO Haycock. Carl, thank you so much for your time. I wonder if you could just start by explaining exactly what Talbot does.
So, good evening, Sally. Talbot is a multidisciplinary specialist in the water space. So we do water solutions for industrial and municipal clients across Africa, but we also have a accredited, SANAS accredited laboratory. And the laboratory has been doing quite a lot of the beach testing over the last year. In fact, since January, the beginning of this year, we've done quite a lot of testing along the coastline and in the rivers around KZN and around Durban.
All right, so do you test for the municipality? Do you test for private individuals? Do you take anyone who wants a test processed?
So we're an independent private laboratory. We will test for pretty much any client. The testing that we've done has been testing that we've sponsored pretty much on our own accord with an NGO. But we're a private sector laboratory, so we do work for municipalities. We do quite a lot of work for Department of Water Sanitation throughout KZN and other regions within South Africa.
All right. So we're getting different stories. I spoke to the deputy city manager last week. He'd actually taken a dip in the sea at Umhlanga, and he told me that the E. coli had been below 500 colony-forming units per 100 millilitres. I can't believe I can actually remember that these days. But that's the danger level. And he said it's actually been safer than that for some time. But then you speak to Action SA and even some of the environmental groups, and they say, look, actually that is still a problem because the Umhlanga pump station is still pumping so much sewage into the sea that people are getting sick and the levels are too high. So you tell me about Umhlanga. I mean, how often have you tested? What are the patterns? What do you see?
So we're doing relatively regular testing at Umhlanga and along the Durban beach front. So we're testing Umhlanga Main Beach and Umhlanga Bronze Beach. We're doing some testing at Westbrook, and we do testing at the 5 or 6 beaches along the Durban beach front. What we've seen is variable results. And I think that's the question at hand. The concentrations of E. coli can vary quite significantly in time and space. So remember, E. coli is a proxy for other pathogens in the water. As you said, it's measured in counts per 100 mils. We've got our different standards for that, and the acceptable guidelines less than 500. And as you mentioned, the eThekwini mayor said that when he swam, or the Umhlanga beaches have been less than that. At times they have been less than that. However, as the currents and the water changes, so that concentration can change with time.
Okay, so the fluctuations are to be expected. How then can you declare a beach open? Is it something you'd need to test the water every single day? I mean, what fluctuations are acceptable?
Yeah. So it is a very, very difficult aspect to define. Essentially what happens is, so you will get daily fluctuations, you get hourly fluctuations, and if you want to talk a little bit about the variability of the concentration of E. coli in water, it's affected by what's happening upstream, whether it's dispersed or point source contamination, discharging into a river. A river discharges water into the marine environment. More of that water will come out at low tide and high tide. So tidal impacts and tidal fluctuations can change the quality of water north or south of that point of discharge, whether it's the Umhlanga River, whether it's the Mngeni River, or whether it's a point source along the beachfront. And then you've got the ocean currents, and and then you've got dispersion and dilution that take place. So the further from that source, the more dilute that E. coli concentration will be. So at any point in time, your concentrations can be quite different to each other.
So was the deputy city manager correct when he says actually for a long time we've had E. coli levels in the safe zone at Umhlanga? Was he right or wrong?
I do recall there being some concentration, so it did decrease for a week or two in Umhlanga. I think our last results were slightly higher, so they were in the 1600 range, so in the above the critical range, but that can be influenced by precipitation or an increase in discharge. I do understand that the municipality is trying to rectify the problem, addressing pump stations and pipelines, etc.
So how often should we test? How quickly does it take to get a result, first of all? And would you say it should be a daily test that's done? How should it work optimally, I suppose, is what I want to know.
So there is no ideal with E. coli, unfortunately, because E. coli test actually takes 24 hours to incubate and to count a result. So you take a sample in a dynamic environment at 10 o'clock today, that environment is completely changed by 11 o'clock, even 10:30. So it's indicative. So one needs to look at the trends. So one should sample, in my mind, one should sample at least daily, if not twice daily. And that will give you a good indication of the trends with time. And if you're seeing a trend of a good result, so a result below critical, so within the acceptable limit over a period of days, then you're probably safe. And if there's no significant precipitation event or event that causes additional contamination, then that trend will probably continue for a period of time. And I think that's the best we can do with E. coli, because it does take time to get a result.
I mean, you've just said that for a couple of weeks, in fact, indeed, it was below 500 CFUs per 100 mils, which is the safe limit. But you've also just said that Umhlanga, you think, is at the moment testing at 1,600 CFUs. So it is very difficult to understand the trends, because ultimately what we're all boiling down to is would you take your kids, if you've got them, and swim at Umhlanga right now?
So that's a difficult one. Based on the results that I saw last week, probably not. If we got other results coming out, in the next 24 hours, we're probably, and they were less than 500, I'd be happy with that.
Is there a trend, though? Is it a declining trend? Because it seems like there was, and now there's been a spike. So I can't even understand what the trend is saying, really.
So what we are seeing is we're seeing a slight decrease in the river systems. Even though the concentration in the river is high, it is diminishing and is declining. Therefore, it's likely that the concentrations in the marine environment will also decline. Your main discharge points of the sewage, of the contaminated water, the sewage that's discharging into the river, is from the river mouths. And as the concentration is declining in the rivers, due to the work that's being done by eThekwini, then there's a likelihood that the water quality will improve. One would also look for things like dirty water. Don't go and swim in dirty water. Don't go and swim at the river mouth. Okay. Make sure you stay away from areas like that. If you are down in the area and you're looking for, looking to go to the beach, look at the trends that you are seeing or that are available, and go north or south to a beach that has a better indicated water quality over a period of time.
I can see that it's really hurting you to talk about Umhlanga in this way, because I'm sure you love the city and you want it to do well. But the reality is you just have to give us, what you're seeing. Is there a safer time of day to swim? You mentioned something a little earlier about low tide and high tide, or is that also really difficult to judge?
No, it's virtually impossible to judge. You can get pockets of fresh water that are not particularly well diluted. So very, very difficult to judge that. UV does have an impact on E. coli, but if the water is very dirty, it's not going to get through and kill the bacteria. So very difficult to say go and swim in the afternoon rather than the morning, or at low tide versus high tide. Your currents will take pockets of water north or south. So yeah, it's very, very difficult to recommend swimming at a particular time.
Trying to sort of wrap it all up, because I'm trying to get a sort of a sense for our viewers who may be heading to the coast. What I'm hearing you saying about Umhlanga is that there has been an uptick recently that needs to be watched. Hopefully it'll get under control. But in terms of beaches that you say are really safe, beaches where we can feel safe and beaches we should avoid, are there some red zones for you?
So as I say, direct, in close proximity to river mouths, just, absolutely avoid those. Don't, I know that Umhlanga River Lagoon, people like to play, and don't go close to that. Similarly, Umgeni River Lagoon, the mouth, don't go close to that. The southern beaches along the Durban beachfront are probably slightly better at the moment. And as you get closer to the river mouth, the quality decreases very slightly, but they all seem to be improving in that area.
And you said earlier that you are seeing very slowly a trend of improvement. Does that suggest that slowly the City Council is getting a handle on this problem, in your view?
So yes, and I think, in some instances you've had pump stations that are completely dysfunctional. As soon as that pump station is repaired, within hours, the water quality can improve. So, if eThekwini continue to repair the infrastructure and they focus on the right areas, I think they can have an impact relatively rapidly.
All right. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time. I understand it's a complex matter, but we've been able to get a real understanding from you. That, of course, is Talbot CEO Haycock being really honest with what the science of these tests is showing. And he is unfortunately saying that at the moment what he's seeing in Umhlanga, an uptick in the E. coli levels. It has been lower for a while. And we should be cautious not to get into the sea near any river mouths, and be aware of where you're swimming and what the latest trends on that particular beach are telling you.